Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Courage Conversation Show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter.
And I'm Maureen Garcia.
We are going to be having a little bit of a different type of show for you tonight. So Maureen is on our board and she sometimes co-hosts with me on the Courage Conversation Show. Tonight we're actually going to be having our own discussion about a topic that has been on social media. It has been really just kind of all over these days. We're going to be revisiting the topic of Christian comedian John Crist. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. And be sure to watch our back episodes because we actually have a previous episode where we discussed his apology, non-apology, and we went into detail and kind of dissected it. I think it is under the show called Abuser Apologies, something like that. We will link to that for sure so you can catch up on that story. But we're here every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. We stream this show and we would love for you to participate with your comments and questions. We do definitely answer those questions in the comments, whether they're coming in live or after the fact. And this is a kind of a topic that just doesn't seem to go away. But as we get into it, you'll see topics like John Crist and men like him never really do seem to go away. So Maureen, if you don't mind, I think I'm just going to go ahead and read sort of a synopsis of the John Crist story. And you actually really eloquently wrote this out. And I just want other people who maybe have heard this story, but it's been a long time, or maybe you're just coming to this episode fresh and this is the first time you've heard his name, just to kind of give you some context of what we're going to be talking about tonight. All right, so John Crist is a Christian comedian who gained an audience doing video skits on social media about Christian culture. His popularity grew, and in 2019, he was scheduled to have a comedy special on Netflix and a book in the works along with his regular tour. He had a comedy tour. He would travel across the country. Then came the allegations of sexual harassment and assault by several women. And I just want to stop here and say that for legal purposes, we must say that these are allegations. But I personally, as an individual, I believe the women who have come forward. And so we have to say allegations, but just know in our hearts that we believe these women who have spoken up. His tour, his book, and his Netflix special were canceled after these allegations came up. He entered a treatment center for sexual addiction, I put that in quotation marks, for 4 months and stepped back from public engagement for a brief 8 months. 8 months, guys. When he returned, he offered a shallow and, in our opinion, manipulative apology similar to what we've seen other fallen Christian leaders make in their apologies. And to us, that means it is a spin that minimized and denied his abusive actions and behaviors. Again, these are alleged actions and behaviors, but we completely believe the victims in this scenario. He also stated, I had assumed that I lived in a community of people that would be the first to look down on me and judge me and point fingers at me. And I felt nothing but the opposite throughout the whole process. Let me just say how hopeful and encouraging that was to be working on my own mental health, bringing up his mental health here, guys, and recovery and healing, his healing. All right, go watch that other episode. We really break this stuff down. And to have a bunch of people rooting for me and supporting me meant the world. That's what Chris said. So now, 3 years later from when all this happened, he has returned full force. And I do mean full force. He still has people rooting for him and supporting him. And he has a comedy special aptly titled What Are We Doing? On YouTube. A book released this October titled Delete That. I also think that's a bit ironic. And other failed attempts to look good online, and a full comedy tour called Fresh Cuts. All of these, I'm just like the irony of the names. Maureen, thank you for kind of writing up that synopsis that I think brings everybody up to date.
You're welcome.
oh gosh, I laugh so I don't cry. It's just
Yeah,
painful. Um, yeah, so Maureen, I was thinking, you actually brought up this idea that we could talk together about deplatforming and people like Crist who are then replatformed, usually in just a few months after they've been deplatformed, and just kind of have
yeah,
conversation about this because I don't know about you, but I read this and I'm just like ticking through my mind all of the other people that I'm just like, this just happens over and over again.
yeah. hmm It does. It's repetitive. Um, and with with a comedian, it's different than if it's a leader in a Christian organization or a
Sure.
Christian college or in a church or a ministry. But it's not as different as you would think because
Mm,
he is specifically a Christian comedian. So if you go on his YouTube channel and you read the comments underneath his new special, you know, what are we
yeah.
doing? Which I think is again an aptly ironic title. What are we doing, John? What are we doing? Um, you'll see that there are people who are saying, he's a great example of a Christian man and a Christian comedian because he doesn't use vulgarity and he doesn't curse and he's funny without using vulgarity and cursing, which is how they um, tend to characterize secular comedians. But not using vulgarity and not cursing is like a minimum standard of what makes somebody a Christian with integrity. So it's he's not exactly a pastor, but he is influencing
Yeah.
what people expect from Christian men and from Christian men with platforms and you know with leadership
Yeah.
things.
Absolutely. 100%. And I want to switch into talking about like what exactly is a platform. But before we do that, like you said, I've heard this too among many Christians that, oh, not swearing is such a huge deal, or
Right,
not taking the Lord's name in vain. But I feel like taking God's name in vain is using God's name to build a platform and then weaponizing your platform. That feels more like taking God's name in vain to me than saying, "Oh my God," or something like that.
right. hmm
Or you know, saying a few light swear words, dropping those out of your comedy special, and instead talking about things that I feel are pretty racist. Like I remember one of his jokes was about how it was such a manly thing to get a pedicure because foreign women, which is women of color, and he's white and anyway, how it's such a powerful thing for a man to have foreign women rubbing your feet, and it just was such a racist, sexist joke, and
Yeah,
people are like, oh yeah, that's cool because he didn't swear, and I'm like, but did he?
right.
It seems more of a curse to say these things about women and women of color than to drop the F bomb, honestly, to
Right.
me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's to distort and twist who God is, and to use God's name to do it, is far more problematic than to use, modern cultural words that are vulgar or crass. Um, like which one is God going to care about more?
Right.
The person who uses his name to hide his own abuse or his own misogyny or sexism or racism, or somebody who says, the F word 15 times in their comedy special.
Hmm.
You know, um, yeah,
Yeah.
which one of these things is not like the other?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. 100%. But we've been
Yeah,
throwing around this word even in like our conversation here. I see it a lot online, but like platform. He had a platform. We're going to be talking about him being replatformed. What does it even mean to have a platform? I know you've got a lot of opinions and research about this. What do you think about platform? What is that?
well, platform is basically you have the privilege to be able to have an audience, but um, Caitlin Beatty had recently put up an Instagram post, and she gave the most simple and succinct and perfect example, like, or definition of what platform is. And she says, I try to think of a platform as a stage from which a communicator delivers a message. That's really, that's it. But then she goes on and she says that that's simple enough. But she says, but the size of the stage doesn't really tell us much about the value of the message,
Mm.
much less the integrity or the motives of the speaker. And it goes without saying that someone can have a massive platform and use that social power to harm others. Um, and unfortunately, it's very hard to hold them accountable for making amends for past behavior because as long as they can hold on to enough fans, they will also find business partners
Hmm.
who want to keep extending their platform for profit. So basically, a platform is you have a stage to communicate a message, um, but the more fans you get, the more complicated your platform becomes.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That that's really enlightening way to look at it. And I know I've said this in the past because I've seen people where they're like, well, God gave them this platform, so it must mean God's favor is shining on them. Like,
Right.
no, it means they've got good marketing and they hit
Yes.
they hit the cultural moment at just the right time. And
Right.
it's just like a celebrity, like, they probably have some skills. You usually have to have some skills to carry you, but
Hmm.
it's about marketing. It's about selling yourself, selling your image, selling your message. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the
Right.
only way you can get yourself heard is by platforming yourself in some shape or fashion. But to automatically believe that because a lot of people are following a person or being influenced by them, that somehow means they have like this divine gift from God.
Yes.
You really need to take a course in marketing. That's just not what's happening there.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's one of the things we're often taught in our Christian culture. Um, that if someone is popular, then it is God's blessing upon them or it's God's purpose for them. And then you'll hear like pastors will do this often, and it's, you know, depending on the context, it can often be a type of grooming or even spiritual abuse. They'll say things like "touch not God's anointed,"
Yeah.
and they're misattributing scripture to basically say, "Don't come at me or my beliefs or my people or my platform." Um, and so there is an element of grooming there and also abuse there. And that's the other thing with platform. You know, Caitlin Beatty uses the word privilege, but it's a type of power.
Yeah.
When you have a platform, you have power and influence over your audience. Um, and the problem with people like Crist and other men who the euphemism is usually that they've had they've there's been some kind of sexual misconduct or
Mhm.
there's been some kind they've fallen into sin or whatever, but the reality is that what they did was they misused their power in order to harm people in sexual ways. And
Mm.
so we tend to in our American culture, and probably more so in our Christian culture, focus on the sexual aspect of it, but sexual aspect of it is just one of the tools to harm people. The misuse of power is the real issue. And that's why replatforming people like this is a problem because their problem isn't sex. Their problem is the power that comes with their platform in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think power dynamics really that was one of the first things that I learned when I studied
Yep.
abuse, when I
Yep.
studied domestic violence, sexual violence. I took a class and that was like one of the first things that they drilled into our heads was abuse is always motivated by a lust for power and control. That is the
Always.
only, that is
Hmm.
always the root cause. And there can be other factors involved, yes, but if you drill it down, that's what it's about. If
Yeah.
you're sexually abusing somebody, it's not because you had a sexual addiction or something like that, because honestly, if that's even a thing, and therapists are saying that addiction is not the right term for that. Psychologists are studying that saying sexual addiction isn't actually an accurate term. But if you were going to blame it on that, which many men do,
Right.
um, if that was the case, you could find somebody who was consenting to it. Like you could find somebody. Or if it is hitting a woman or hitting another person, you don't do that just because you have anger management issues.
Right.
If you're really angry, you could have anger issues, but go punch a wall. That's not in any way trying to assert power over somebody else. Um,
Right.
don't punch the person. There are deliberate choices in how you're wielding your power, um,
Right.
and choosing who you're going to victimize with that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that really is the root of all these things. And um, I also think that when we're looking at power, platform, privilege, even when we're looking at like a Christian comedian,
Right.
Christianity is the dominant religion in our country, and there is a lot of Christian
Yeah.
privilege. Um, we aren't oppressed in the U.S. for being Christian, whereas a lot of other religions and people who practice differently than mainstream Christianity are oppressed and discriminated against largely. Um, I know we had a show a couple weeks ago with Chrissy Stroop, and she was just talking about Christian privilege, and it was
Yeah.
really enlightening there. But there's just so many layers of power, being a man, having a large platform, um, Christian privilege. And with that Christian privilege comes people assume that you're a good person and give you
Yeah.
a lot of, cheap forgiveness, um, because you carry that title. And so platform looks different for different people. But when you dig into this story, I think it's really clear that there was a lot of power and privilege at play with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing with him being a comedian, we know from research and from experience that when pastors or leaders are using their platform to kind of influence their congregation or their followers um, to agree with them
Mm,
on everything, that there can be a type of grooming, a community grooming from the pulpit that happens, right?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so, the grooming will prepare the hearers, the listeners, to support somebody if they are caught in abuse, to set up potential victims. Um, and so we know that we can identify some of the problematic things that are taught, like what you just talked about with the
Mm,
whole, the easy grace kind of easy forgiveness kind of thing. That's a very popular
yeah.
um, message in churches that have unhealthy environments that are not safe for potential
Mm,
victims or for survivors. But the thing with comedy is that, and there's been plenty of research done on this. Comedy reveals comedy is funny because we all have a basic or if it's funny, we all have a basic understanding of the worldview that's being poked fun at. If we
right.
didn't all have certain underlying assumptions,
Mm,
then it wouldn't be funny. So, for instance, if someone is going to do jokes about, you know, gender or marriage relationships, we all have to have a similar understanding of the roles and expectations within our specific culture for those jokes to fall funny. And it's not that all jokes like that are going to be offensive or problematic. It's, the degree to which the comedian is denigrating one sex over the other, that would be the problem. But in general, you can have tons of comedians that don't do that, and their humor is funny.
mhm,
Um, but so the thing with John Crist is whether or not he is intentional about it when
mhm.
he is making jokes that are misogynistic or sexist
Yeah.
or racist or against, like anti non Christians or anti atheist or,
Mhm.
anti anything that him and people who identify with
Right.
him. When he is making those jokes, um, he's grooming his audience to not just agree with his viewpoint, but also to believe that it's okay to
Mhm.
communicate things that could be considered very offensive to other people. He's creating an environment among his followers that say, not only is this funny, but it's okay to use this to, denigrate other people, kind of thing.
Right.
So humor is very revelatory. It reveals to us a whole lot about our characters, what we find funny,
Yeah.
tells people how potentially how dangerous we can be or
Right.
how safe.
I mean, that makes so much sense. And it's also very unifying too, because
Yes,
similar to if
exactly.
you're in a church service and you're all singing
Yeah.
together, like some people
Hmm.
call that the Holy Spirit, but science just shows like if you hit those certain chords and the lighting is right and you've got that speaker in the background while the music's playing low and then you all sing and then you all do that key change and you just feel like your spirit rises, like that is something that you can induce in your body through music, but you can also
Yeah.
induce that through laughter. When there's a connection, you're instantly connected to an entire room of people, or you're connected to a person on social media. And so you grow this affinity to that person because it does something in your body when you laugh collectively and you connect somebody. It's like, I feel like you can get really vulnerable without having to risk a lot.
Yes. Mhm.
Just by laughing, you're like identifying without actually, and I saw that even in my family growing up. It was one of those situations where there was a lot of stuff going down that wasn't great, but we would all get together and we'd have a good time because we would tell funny stories. And it immediately made us all feel connected. And so we could forget about the problems. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it almost gets you in this state of, um, I don't know, it kind of just puts your brain in a different state where you're more likely to be susceptible to a message coming at you because you've dropped your guard and you're laughing, and that can be
Right.
a really good thing. You can drop your guard and you can laugh, and then there can be healing that comes in. And we're going to have a guest come on the show pretty soon that's going to talk about that. But it also can make you really vulnerable and more open to exploitation too.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So he was deplatformed, or at least that's what people are calling. Um,
Hmm.
he had about an 8 month ish kind of little break. He went
Hiatus.
to some sort of a quote unquote therapy type center for sexual addiction, which again, I balk at that term sexual addiction.
Yeah.
Just, I think there's a lot of issues with that terminology. Um,
Mhm.
and even I would be really curious what that treatment facility was like, because I know about treatment facilities like that are just not helpful at all. I know Reformers
Yep.
Unanimous is a big one. There was actually, I think he might be the president or the leader of it now. He actually went to my church growing up, and I couldn't say that I personally feel like he has any qualifications to lead something like this. So there's questions there about what actually really happened at this treatment facility. And then all of a sudden, he's back. He's got this special, he's got this book, he's got this tour, and he doesn't seem like the only one. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and we've talked about this before. There's, you have Mark Driscoll, who there was the debacle over at
Yeah.
Mars Hill where I forgot the name of the specialist, but he's in the psychology field, and he was one of the people who assessed the Mars Hill church culture.
Yeah.
And he is very conservative and came away and said that it was the most disturbing, um, you know, corrupt kind of
Yeah.
church environment he'd ever experienced. And Mark Driscoll was the head of that, and he took a little bit of a break with Christians. For some reason, we have this idea that 1 year, 18 months, or 3 years is the way to go. And even according to that timeline, John Crist cut it real short.
Yeah, 8 months is not
8 months,
long.
right? And he complained he didn't have his phone for 4 months in the treatment center. Oh, poor John.
For him.
Yes. So, but you see a lot of these guys, like even Mark Driscoll. There was documented evidence of how destructive of a leader he was, and how much harm he had caused. And he goes away for a little while, and then popped up in a different um, uh, type of Christian culture, and then but now is back kind of more on the main, what we would consider mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
um, and doing marriage um, seminars and lessons, and his ideas about gender and sex are extremely problematic,
So problematic.
and harmful, and you know some of them are at the very least sexist, and some of them are just literally full blown misogyny.
Yeah.
Like things that things I won't even repeat because
Right.
they're that he wrote them, and a Christian publishing company published these things that he
Yes.
said. How did this get by anybody?
Anxiousness can strike at any time, while driving a car, in the middle of the night, when giving a work presentation, or in a crowded place. Introducing Calmigo, a smart calming device that learns your personal breathing patterns and adapts to you for immediate relief in just 3 minutes. It quiets your senses through breathing regulation, multisensory stimulation, and calming scents. Don't stress another moment. Click the Learn More button and start using Calmigo today.
Let's see who else we have. We have
Andy Savage. That's one.
Andy Savage, right?
Mhm.
Who, he's another one with the Christian apologies. He's the one who got a standing ovation when he
Yep.
told his, um, I still can't believe it, stands up in front of his congregation to admit to having abused Jules Woodson when she was a teenager under his spiritual leadership. And the difficulty was, he admits that he did it, but the way he admits it had so much spin, so much minimization, so much distancing.
20 years
I mean,
ago, 20 years ago, 20
20
years
years
ago.
ago, that
It's
was
like,
the phrase. Him and his
there a
pastor
glitch?
used the phrase, what happened 20 years ago, probably at least 20 times between the two of them. But that's a way that abusers routinely try to disconnect from the abuse. Oh, that happened before. I'm a different person now.
Right.
I'm a changed person. I would never
Right.
do that again. Um, but even if someone does change, and the statistics are slim,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there are some that change, who do the work to change. Um, but even if they did change, uh, part of the change, you would know that they changed because they would take responsibility for what they had done. They
Yes.
wouldn't ever say 20 years ago, I did such and such. They would say, I did this. It was harmful. I shouldn't have done it. I am sorry. But his apology was chock full of just like kind of abuser manipulation, like the whole
Mm-hmm.
she's still damaged, she's bitter and broken, we're all healthy, let's all pray for her, and the absolute arrogance
Yeah.
of doing that. But his congregation stood up and applauded for him, um,
And then
and
he's got a
yeah,
new
and
church. He's got a
yes,
new
yeah. So
church.
he
Oh my
stepped
God.
away for a while, and now he's got a whole new church, and people are so excited that he's back because they missed him. Um, and it's like how this it really is, it's a misunderstanding of the whole power dynamic thing.
Yeah.
If you understood that abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, all of this has to do with the
Mm-hmm.
misuse of power. These guys can't be given power, and replatforming them is just giving them more power. So even if you're a callous human being and you don't care anything for the victims, if you did care authentically for the perpetrators of this harm, you would say you can't have any kind of powerful influential platform back for your own good, because you're going to damage your own soul. Um, so even if you didn't care about victims, if you care about the abusers, which a lot of people claim to do, they shouldn't
Yeah.
be replatformed. They shouldn't.
And that's a
Um,
good point. I mean, that's such a good point that a lot of times they don't care about the victims. A lot of times they'll say they care about the perpetrators,
right.
but really I think all they care about is being comfortable in themselves. They don't
Yeah.
want to have to face any kind of they don't want to have to face that they could have been led astray, that this person they believed and trusted isn't trustworthy. And so they
Right.
won't even say, hey, let's get this person help because we really love him. No, there's even just that, like, well, I don't want to even do that. I just want to pretend this didn't happen. I just want to pretend and
Exactly, right. It's
go
the
away.
whole relief of, well, now that's over with. We can get on with the real work of God's kingdom,
Right.
or the real, ministry of the
Yeah.
gospel kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Who
you
else we
know,
got? There's so many. It's like, anybody have like their bingo chart? Like, has
there,
anybody go yet? Just wait, we got a few more.
we have Julian Trevigian,
Ah,
who
yeah,
he's one of the ones that fell into sexual sin. I believe he committed adultery. I think the common story is he did it once, but from what I've read, there were allegations of more.
hmm
He's now uh, divorced from whoever he committed adultery on, and is married to someone new and has a whole new ministry. And his ministry, of course, is focused on grace for people who have fallen from grace.
Oh my.
So basically, his belief is that because he's experienced this, and gotten back his platform, that now he can help others. He can be real with others and accept others who they really are,
hmm
because he received that same kind of grace.
Right,
Um,
right.
and
Yeah,
so, and that in and of itself is a problem, because he he has yet to be really honest about who he is,
right.
and
And
people
was
have yet to
really
really see
just
that
adultery
reflected
with
now.
the power position. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um,
Um,
Paige Patterson.
Paige
I think
Patterson.
I just saw some ads on social media.
Yeah.
Like he was speaking again, and it was some long ass sermon title like that. It's just like a jumble of words, I guess, to make him sound smart or something. But maybe that makes up for everything. Yeah, again, I'm laughing because it's just so infuriating. Like I would cry. But I mean, all of the terrible stuff that he said. You know, uh, he was an ex-president of the Southern Baptist Convention, had so many different roles and ties, and my understanding was that he was a huge part of like bringing in the conservative takeover and all of that, and just saying terrible things about women from the platform, women of color, young teen women and children with their bodies, how they looked, and just terrible things to abuse victims and survivors. What am I forgetting here? I mean, it's the laundry list of him.
We're forgetting that he he bullied rape victims
Yes.
who were victimized in his seminary, to drop uh, to just drop it, to not go to the
Yeah.
authorities to report. So I believe, in one of the claims, that I believe has been verified,
Mhm.
was that he told people, "Leave me alone in my office for 10 minutes with her, and I will get her to, back down," kind of
Wow.
thing. So he intentionally intimidated and bullied victims to silence them. A lot of abusers and abuser allies do that as a technique to keep the abuse hidden, but many of them don't have the awareness that
Yeah.
that's what they're doing. It's just how they relate to others. It's like
Right.
when you catch a kid doing something and they go, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah.
sorry," like that's what some of them do. But he knew that he was, intending to intimidate, to get somebody who's already vulnerable and victimized.
Right.
He was
Right.
intending to intimidate and did it. And then the ad that you had seen, which I had also seen, about him speaking at a church with some long title of whatever his talk was going to be, that came within a couple of weeks of um, the SBC Executive Committee
Yeah.
guidepost report that laid out, credible allegations of what Paige Patterson had done when he had done it, how problematic it was, his abuse of power,
Mm-hmm.
or misuse of power sometimes. Um, and then within, that report comes out, we're all reading it, and then you go online and you're like, Paige Patterson, who I just read all these horrifically scary things about, is now
Yes.
speaking at this church. Did the church not read the report? But, I think they did. They just, that particular church didn't seem to care.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, they get replatformed. It's almost like at this point you wonder, um, what would get somebody rejected?
Right.
What could you possibly do that would get you rejected completely? I mean,
Right.
we know that, Rick Warren was arguing that, ordaining women shouldn't be something that gets you kicked out of the Southern
Right.
Baptist Convention. So we know that ordaining women might get you kicked out,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah. Critical
raping them,
race theory,
humiliating them,
support of critical race theory might get
yeah,
you kicked out.
abusing children, that
Mm-hmm.
won't get you.
Right.
That's not a problem. That'll just get you, a vacation from 8 months to 3 years, and then a new
Mm-hmm.
gig. You know, um, so it's really problematic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
the other one you had mentioned earlier when we were talking was Josh
Duggar.
Duggar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I
Pick it
mean, with
up.
him, it's he is in jail now, and
Mm-hmm.
but that is so rare. Like I I don't expect men who do bad things. I don't expect them to face any just consequences. Like I don't expect that. So for him to actually be in jail now is a huge thing. But
Yes.
people knew what he had done to his sisters, and I think it was a babysitter. He
Right.
then was on the Ashley Madison list leak, cheating on
Yep.
his wife. There was also I think her name was Miss Dillon, Dianca Dillon. She accused him of sexual assault, so
Mm-hmm.
many other things. And he made some sort of an apology, rejected some of the claims, said yes to some of them. And then, he's just living his life, and, people are still supporting him. And um, to me, it looked like he was replatformed. And it was only when they had images of child sexual abuse and a huge investigation and a raid that brought him into court. And he only got 12 and a half years, which is honestly just so small compared
Nothing.
to all the
Yeah.
things that he's done. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so rare for a man to actually come up against the justice system when they have this power, privilege, prestige. And
Yep.
it was honestly shocking to me that anything actually happened to him, because usually it does not.
Right. And it had to escalate. So it's like think how many times he was replatformed
Right,
before the federal government got involved, and
right,
now he's in prison. You know,
right.
so it was, we find out that he, molested his sisters while they were sleeping, when he was young, um, and then he didn't get the proper help that uh, that he would have needed. And
Mm-hmm.
just for anybody listening, um, teenagers are actually a large percentage of teenagers do sexually abuse. We tend to think of teenagers as not, like, oh, but they're innocent, whatever, but they do sexually abuse. And their reasons for doing it are not always the same as an adult
Right,
offender's.
right.
Plus, their brains aren't finished developing yet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to help somebody and they're a teenager, you need to hold them accountable and get them the right qualified kind of help
Right,
combined with accountability, because they have the best chance of changing and getting healthier than an adult who has been thinking about sexually abusing for a decade and starts or has been sexually abusing from the time they became an adult.
Right.
So if he had gotten proper help, he might not have become the man he is now.
Right.
That's what I'm to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And
so
that's even if, just like agreeing with all that you said, if you were hurt by somebody when they were a teenager, that doesn't reduce your trauma.
absolutely
Like not
right.
trying to minimize that at all. And I knew that
Yeah,
wasn't what you were saying, Maureen, but just
yeah,
being clear with that.
absolutely.
But
Just because just because they have a reasonable a reasonable explanation for the behavior does not excuse the behavior.
yeah, yeah.
It's still traumatic and harmful and damaging.
Hmm.
It's just that the only difference between the
Hmm.
harm a teenager will do
Yep.
and an adult will do is has to do with themselves, not with their
Right.
victim. The
Right.
impact is going to be the same on the
Yeah.
victim.
Yeah.
But if you do want, you know, teenagers to not grow up to continue to abuse,
Right.
there
Yeah.
are things that can be done.
Yes.
But
Absolutely.
the impact on the victims is still going to be the same. And also, just because somebody abuses doesn't automatically mean that they were a victim of abuse.
Right.
That's a
That's
huge
true.
myth that
Y-
people believe. If if being abused was a cause of abuse, there would be more abusers than they are,
Yes. Yes.
um, because victims outnumber the abusers, and we would all be abusers ourselves. But that's
Right.
not how it works. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's just kind of an aside.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
other thing is, so you have Josh. He gets caught with his sisters. Nobody really holds him accountable or has any idea what to do, and so they handle it wrong. And to a degree, I can understand not knowing what to do. They're in
Hmm.
an environment and a culture. Again, this is not an excuse; it's an explanation. They were in
Hmm.
an environment and culture that had no clue what to do, so they did the best that they knew how, which was basically a mess.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
they didn't seek outside help from somebody or from an organization that would have a clue about what to do,
Yeah.
um, you know, for a number of reasons. But anyway, so then he grows up, this comes out, it's a scandal, people are horrified, and his parents work really hard with their influence and their money to get people to forgive their son and to explain away their son's
Mhm.
behavior.
Yep.
And even two of his sisters come out and speak on behalf of him,
Yep.
which is just a horribly manipulative
Ugh.
thing to do uh, to victims, to expect
Yeah.
them to bear that burden. Um, and then after that, he's involved in some organization that is all about family values. And then the whole Ashley Madison thing happened. So it's one thing, like people are like, oh, so he cheated on his wife. It's not a big deal. Right. If you're a regular person, it's a big deal to that family. But if you're a public figure and you are arguing for and advocating for laws to be put into place that
Mhm.
uphold family values, and then you find out, that this person doing this
Yep.
not only molested his sisters and babysitter, but is now potentially cheating on his wife and or sexually assaulting people that he's met
Mhm.
through this website. That's a problem. But anyway, when he did that, a lot of people came. He apologized. Of course, his wife takes him back because what other choice does she have in that environment, right? But there were people that defended him, and one of them is Dr. Mike Brown. And let me see if I can find.
Yeah, yeah. And I think with
He's
this, we're gonna switch into kind of talking about what the problem is with replatforming. And Maureen, I
mhm.
know that you've got a lot of things to say on this. We were just chatting before, and guys, you're gonna wanna listen up. I know this episode is a little bit longer than some of our others, but like this is good stuff. This is good stuff.
Okay. So one of the things that Dr. Brown had written about, um, and we can link that article if you want, Ashley.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, he basically said that you know that Jesus really does change people, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and he says, critics of the Duggar family want to indict them and throw them under the bus. But Jesus really does transform sinners. And how many of us did wicked things as teenagers? And he's referring to, Josh's abuse of his sleeping sisters, right?
And I can tell
Um,
you, I did not do that kind of wicked thing as a teenager. So I'm like, I don't know who he's
but
lumping in that category.
yeah, we got to get a therapist on to
Yeah.
psychoanalyze him, right? Um, so, and then he says, um, there's no excuse for sin, so own up to it, and that we're all guilty of something. So he's basically saying, you want to judge Josh, but look at your own sins, kind of
Yeah.
thing,
Thin
right?
level.
And these
Yeah.
are very common responses when famous people, famous Christians get any kind of criticism.
Yeah.
Um, hold on. And then he says, that because of these experiences that Josh has had, that he can be an ambassador on behalf of the abused, which is a huge problem. Why would you want an abuser to be an ambassador on behalf of the abused,
Oh
right?
my gosh, that's
It's
horrible.
terrifying, right? And he can even help abusers as well, right? Um, and then he reiterates that we need to be careful how we judge, right?
The only thing
So
I can see being an accurate thing that he could probably do is he could probably help other abusers know how to abuse, but I don't think he can help them reform themselves because he's not reformed.
exactly, right. And that's one of the things that Dr. Brown's article is um, kind of highlighting this idea that, because he is given some kind of performative sign of, repentance, that now we can trust him.
Mm.
So here we go. Let's see. Um, so one of my responses to Dr. Brown at the time when he wrote this was, I, I'm a person of faith, and I have no doubt that God transforms sinners. So the question isn't whether or not God transforms sinners. We, as most mainstream Christians, will agree on that.
Sure, sure.
Um, so Mike Brown is basically bringing up a point we all agree on, as if this is some profound new idea. The problem for me is not whether or not God transforms sinners, which again I
Hmm.
assume He does. It's has God transformed this specific sinner? Is
Mm,
this specific sinner safe? Has he done the work and
right.
co-worked with God to become a safer individual? And you can't, with Mike Brown's criteria, you can't um, evaluate that. He just takes it
Right.
for granted, right? So he says, Dr. Brown says, and this is a quote: "The fact is that while he did sin grievously, through repentance, faith, and counseling, he became a new man." But he can be as certain as he wants to be, but he doesn't know that, in fact.
Right, right.
Um, he's hoping that, but
Hmm.
he doesn't know that. And Boz Tchividjian, who he is the founder of the organization Grace, Godly Responses to Abuse in Christian Environments. He says that this idea, this new man argument, that God, made him a new man, is a tool or a technique that abusers often use within
Hmm.
Christian environments to kind of, you know, get cheap grace, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then hold on. And then one of the other things with Mike Brown was when he started to push back publicly on Twitter with certain victims and advocates who had a problem with his article. He kept saying, "But they're misunderstanding me. They're misunderstanding me. Why aren't they listening to me?" And if you want to engage in conversations with victims, or if you want to write articles advocating for
Hmm.
abusers, make sure you have a thick skin. Make sure
Yeah.
that you're not gonna, because these people, you can't get involved in a conversation with victims and then say they got upset with me, I'm now the victim. That's ridiculous. You have to be able to take criticism, and you have to be able to really listen, because listening is really the only thing that's going to get us um, moving towards a safer kind of
Yeah.
environment, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he, so what Dr. Brown did, and again, I'm
Hmm.
assuming it was inadvertently, I don't deny that he authentically believes these
Sure,
things,
sure.
but I think he doesn't really understand um, the theology behind them or the scripture being used behind them.
Hmm.
And he
Or
has no
psychology,
clue.
I mean, of
Right,
abusers.
exactly. Yeah, he doesn't know anything about abuse dynamics. And so he's applying like this shallow theological understanding to
Mm-hmm.
things that he really has no expertise or understanding about. And by doing that, he is advocating for the replatforming of Josh, Duggar, and he's doing it in a way like he's even suggesting, like, oh, when we replatform him,
Mm-hmm.
he can work with abuse victims,
Right,
he can
right.
work with abusers, and it's like no, this is, but this is very common that
Mm-hmm.
other Christians will come out, specifically Christians who don't have um, the understanding
Yeah,
about any of the abuse dynamics. They will come out and defend the person that they care about or who's their friend. And I mean, that's been happening with John Crist. People who are friends of his, who also have platforms, are advocating for his, successful replatforming.
right,
So Annie F. Downs, who is a podcaster and an author, and she's a Christian based in, I want to say, Nashville.
okay.
And but she writes about and focuses on, happy things, like
Yeah, yeah.
being happy. And so I can see how John Crist's, comedy fits
Mm-hmm.
into the whole being happy.
Yeah,
But recently, after the Guidepost SBC Executive Committee report came out, she put up some tweets about how we have to hold abusive people accountable, and that
mm-hmm.
we can't just let people's secret sins kind of stay hidden.
Right,
But she received a lot of pushback from people who were like, well, how do you reconcile what you're saying with your, commitment to replatform John Crist? Like, how are
right,
you say one thing here, but your behavior with this specific person is, revealing that you don't really believe that, at least not when it comes to you and people that you know.
right,
Um,
right. Yeah, I mean, it's sadly common. I mean, this is, I joked earlier about, do you have your bingo sheet out and has anybody got bingo yet? Just let us know in the comments if you did have this on a bingo sheet by chance. But there's so many of these examples, and it's
yeah,
not just the people who, we talked about a spectrum of people. We talked about a spectrum of people who had different types of offenses. They're not all being accused of the same things.
right.
But they all had positions of power.
Yeah,
They all misused that power, and at least for a short amount of time they were kind of deplatformed or they stepped away. And for
right,
most of them, that was sort of their strategic choice, I think. um, but
right.
then you have these supporters who kind of come behind them, especially
Hmm.
even during that phase where they're kind of on hiatus, talking with Jesus, getting things right, fixing my mental health, all the things that they say. And they get these people, like we read at the
Mhm.
beginning, kind of like what John Crist was saying in his apology, non apology thing about he was surprised how many people supported him. Well, you
Right.
get
Mhm.
people like the woman you were speaking of who continue to support these people. It gives them this sense of like, hey, I can make a comeback because people are supporting me to do that. And then they do
Right.
make a comeback. And so
Right.
maybe we can kind of wrap this up with two things, like, how does replatforming happen? And responsible people, how can we respond in situations like this? How does it happen
Right.
that they get back to power, and what are we supposed to do about it as people who are concerned?
Right. Mhm. Yeah. Well, the first thing would be replatforming happens because we let it, or not specifically you and I, Ashley,
Hmm.
but Christians who are fans or
Right.
followers, and so that's one of the unfortunate things is for whatever reasons, like with Annie Downs, like again, um, I don't think she's doing anything malicious. I don't think she's necessarily aware. She might not believe the allegations against him.
Hmm.
Um, but what she's doing is, you know, advocating for him as a person who is worth listening to, someone who has integrity, or someone who exemplifies what it means to be a Christian comedian in his
Mhm.
case, right? And the difficulty, and one of the things that we can do is, like, for Annie Downs, what she needs to do is she needs to be able to say, you know, look at what I'm writing here about how uncomfortable or angry or righteously indignant I am about these abuses that have happened,
Yeah.
and about holding these people accountable. And then she needs to take the tension that she has,
Mm.
about those things, and people who she knows well, like John Crist.
Mhm.
Um, there's a tension there. She believes the one thing, but she's not applying it to someone who fits into those categories.
Mhm.
So what we all need to be able to do, Annie Downs included, is
Mm.
if someone that we know is credibly accused of something, we need to be able to take a step back and
Yeah.
say, this is a possibility, you know, even if you're not ready to do the this is a probability yet,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
take a step back. This is a possibility.
Mhm.
And what do I do with this possibility?
Right.
How, if this possibility is shown to be true to me, how do I then react? What will happen to me? What will happen to my faith, to my worldview, to my ability to trust other people? You have to be aware that there's going to be some kind of collateral damage to you
Yeah, yeah.
if you expect that somebody that you love and care and trust
Mm.
is capable of something like that.
Right.
So we all have to kind of do that kind of work. But the other thing is, we can't automatically discount, just because somebody uh, has been abused or allegedly abused by someone we know,
Mhm.
or by somebody who's influenced us. Like,
Right.
for instance, I know tons of people who've never met Ravi Zacharias, but their spiritual formation was
Yeah.
significantly impacted by his
Mhm.
teachings. So they don't know him,
Right.
but who they are and how they
Mhm.
understand themselves as believers, or as humans, or as people with ethical and moral integrity, is based on things that this man, who's now being accused of these things that go against what they personally believe
Mhm.
are acceptable. You have to be able to wrestle with that kind of tension. It's like, at some point, Ashley, you were like, they just wanted to kind of be done. We don't want to do the hard work. We just want to
Yeah.
be like, oh, let them go get treatment for their mental health
Mhm.
for a while, and then they can just kind of come
Yeah.
back, and we don't have to deal with any of that. But you know, if we want to create safer communities, and to create platforms that are safer, um, for potential victims, for communities in general, and even for the people who would misuse power if they had the ability to do it. We need to be able to look at our own stuff and see,
Yeah.
in what ways we have been, groomed as a community to accept, um, you know, like, for instance, John Chris saying he felt loved and supported, and he was surprised by that. I don't think his victims, or his alleged victims, felt loved and supported by the Christian community.
Right. Right.
I think they felt attacked.
Yeah.
And if we have evidence upon evidence upon
Mhm.
evidence about what happens to women, children, men who come forward and say they were abused. And it's not pretty. It's, people get really attacked horribly. Like,
Yeah.
so I think that's one of the things we need to do, is we really need to be able to, look at ourselves. The other thing is, we need to learn about abuse
Mhm.
dynamics.
Mhm.
For, Mike Brown basically wrote this article completely and willfully ignorant of
Yeah.
anything having to do with abuse. It reminds me of, there was some kerfuffle online recently. The Gospel Coalition, like a week ago, put up a John Piper thing where he was
Oh,
giving
yeah.
advice to a woman who was
Mhm.
asking, "How do I respond to my harsh husband?"
Right.
And like, the responses he gave would be wonderful in a healthy marriage, but this
Mhm.
woman is talking about a harsh husband.
Right.
Um, which, you know, in Christian circles,
It's
we
code
use
for
euphemisms. It sounds kind of abusive. It sounds emotionally
yeah,
abusive. Some of the things in there, and he's basically giving her a recipe for her abuser to escalate,
right.
because he doesn't know.
Mhm.
And it's been decades now, and he's
Yeah,
gotten enough pushback that, you know, and he's not a stupid person, you know,
right.
so he knows where to find the information. He
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
refuses to use the information, you know.
Yeah,
So, you know, we have to choose to not be willfully ignorant. We have to choose to rely on people who are victims and who are experts, you know, to tell us, you know,
mm,
what does this look like and what are the best ways to respond. What we've seen over and over again is when you have someone like Josh Duggar, Larry
mhm.
Nasser, um, you know, any of these kind of
Yeah,
fellas, if they are exposed once and not held accountable, they will get bolder.
mm,
It's not
yeah,
a question. It's not they may get bolder. They will get bolder.
yeah,
It's symptomatic of the kind of issue that they have.
mhm,
And then if it happens again and they're not held accountable and people believe them instead of the victim, they get more bold until you get to the point where someone like Larry Nassar is literally abusing children while holding conversations with their parents in the same
right.
room. And people think that that's crazy, that, oh, that's an extreme abuser.
Mhm.
No, many, many, many abusers abuse with other people in the room.
Yeah,
They just do. And part of it is because they know that they can get away with it, and if they don't get away with it, they know that they can be replatformed in whatever family, church, organization,
yeah,
job they have. So there we go.
yeah. That that is so good, so important, and I think just to kind of wrap it up,
Mhm.
I think you really hit on how important it is for us as individuals to number one, look at our own biases
Yeah,
when people come forward with allegations about people we know, love, or trust, that we should take those just as seriously as the random, story you hear on the local news from somebody you're not aware of. Often I'll
right.
see comments being really harsh on local news pages with people who don't know
Right.
um, the perpetrator. But when it's somebody you
Mhm.
know, love, and trust, you need to first look at your biases. Then after that, you need to get educated
Yep.
and stop being willfully ignorant
Hmm.
and speak your mind. When things happen with these
Absolutely.
public figures, you
Yep.
say something.
Yep.
Don't be one of the people that they look at and are like, okay, my audience was either silent or supportive of me, and there was just a
Right.
few people saying that they think this is wrong and that I should public
Right.
step away from this role. be
Mhm.
be vocal about things that you are educated on, and get educated on things so you can properly speak to different issues. um don't be the type of person who replatforms abusive people.
Right.
um and I know that I've had to do several things with organization that I have, encounters that I've had with people, where I've had to say, you know what, if I remove this person from this position or from this opportunity, I'm going to lose something.
Yeah.
But I've had to make that hard decision to do that and to say, it's worth losing this. It's worth losing having connection to this fame or to this platforming that it could maybe shared spotlight on me or my organization. Like,
Right.
don't be enamored with the brightness of who they are to let that take away from you seeing clearly what they're doing, and how that can also be a form of grooming you to make
Yep.
you feel that if you continue to support them, you'll get some kind of favor or privilege as well.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, Maureen, do you have any other final thoughts on this? I think you've just shared so many really important things. I hope people will take all this to heart.
So I do have one more thing to say, and it's another idea from Caitlin
Yeah.
Beatty. She says that I believe that if you find yourself with a platform, you bear responsibility for how you use it,
Mm,
for what you say, how you say it, who else you platform and partner with, what
mm,
messages and voices you amplify, and how your words affect your listeners. And I agree with all that. And I would add to that, um, even if you don't have a platform, if you follow people on their platform, you still have those responsibilities. You have the
mhm.
responsibility to watch and see, like you just said, and to speak up if you see something that's problematic. So,
Yeah.
for instance, with the Annie Downs thing, she had
Mhm.
people kind of come at her a bit harshly, but she also had people come at her and be like, "Listen, I love your stuff. I
Yeah.
love you. How do you intend to reconcile this? That you believe this one thing, you know?" So, depending on the context, you might want to come at someone a little harder,
Mhm.
like me and Mike Brown, or you might want to come at someone a little gentler. If you think that they're not being malicious or
Mhm.
belligerent.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yes, like you said, speak up. Contact a person and say, "Listen, I'm not sure if you're aware of this information.
Mhm.
If you are, this is a problem.
Right.
And
Right.
what are you going to do about it?" And if they don't do the right thing, then they lose followers.
Yeah.
And that should be where your commitment is. If you follow a
Mm.
platform and they're doing the wrong thing, you step back
Yeah.
and say, "I no longer support this platform." So,
Yeah, 100%. And I like how you talked about those two different approaches. And in my mind, I separate my approaches in calling out people. And I use a couple different pieces of criteria to help me with that. One is
yeah,
what kind of platform and power do they already have? Because if you
right,
have less power and you're speaking truth to power, you can come at things a bit more strongly because you have to come at things strongly to be heard
right.
in front of a powerful person or organization.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're talking to somebody who is quote unquote an equal size platform or somebody smaller, you're the one in the position of power, and your
Hmm.
words are very poignant when you say them, and you can say them a lot, still directly, but in maybe a softer tone, because your words already carry weight because you have a position of maybe power in the ecosystem kind of over them.
Right. Hmm.
The other thing
Absolutely.
I determine how I come at somebody is what is my goal?
Right.
Because if my goal is to help them see the light on something because I believe that they're actually the type of person that cares about this and I could affect change by approaching them, you have to remember that even good people have egos. And
Yep.
if you just come attacking somebody right away, um, when they're truly a person that might be open to change, that can really get people up in their stuff and their triggers. And so if you can come
Right.
at them directly, not holding back on the truth, but just, maybe more gently, if you think there's somebody who could actually change, that can be a
Right.
more effective approach if you think that your goal is actually to make a difference with that person. But then there are other people who they've already put their flag in the ground. They've already chosen their position. These are usually the ones that already have a lot of power.
Yeah.
And they are overtly not supporting victims because they've purposed, to support an
Right.
abuser. That's also when you come at people a lot more strongly. And I'm not saying to do anything where some people get wild and they're doing death threats. We do not support anything
No,
violent or anything like that. But
that's
just
not what we
sometimes
mean.
tone. Yeah, sometimes your
Use
tone
your
can be a little
words.
sharper. Yes, yes, use your words and try to measure in that situation. Is this something where I need to be a little sharper because of their power position or because of their firm stance? And my goal is really just to have this conversation to create awareness for people watching? Or
Exactly.
is it something where I could actually affect some change? Maybe I actually have more power in the situation and coming just as truthfully, but maybe more gently would be more effective. I think sometimes you
Yeah.
have to balance that out, and it's not always clear cut. Sometimes
No.
you have to change approaches in the middle, but
Yes.
just
Hmm.
be mindful of what you're actually trying to accomplish.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
conversations.
And sometimes relationships will build out of that. If you contact
Yeah.
someone, you both have differing opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, listen, I have a problem with this. You
Yeah.
know, you pretty much can tell based on some, like you said, like if they are they like hardcore, I'm not going to listen, I'm just going to criticize you or block you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or are they the type of person who'd be like, wait, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you explain to me why this is a problem for you or why
Right.
you're concerned about this?
Yeah.
Um, those are two different responses that people like. Some people can listen and some people can't.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones who can listen, if you also are willing to listen, that can be the start of a relationship that impacts both of you. You
Right.
know, and then anybody who's watching your relationship develop, if it's like a social media kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it takes wisdom. And then the other thing, of course, is sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes victims are going to be, or survivors are going to be triggered by things.
Sure.
Sometimes people will come at you harshly,
Yeah.
and you need extra grace. You need a thicker skin because this is what we do. You can't
Right.
just criticize and attack somebody who's hurt your feelings.
Right.
If you want to be in this area, you need to work
Yeah.
on your own stuff, because whatever triggered them, we're not the issue. The issue is,
Right.
whatever jerk abused them in the first place.
Right.
And so you just have to be, compassionate sometimes to
Right.
people who met you harsh, and
Right.
it's not about you,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not an easy thing to learn, but especially if you're someone who has a lot of power and is a
Yes.
white male Christian, um,
Yeah.
cough
Do
cough.
not be using my words that I said about, your tone and using that back against victims, saying that their tone is off if
Right,
you're a person in
exactly,
power.
yeah,
Like,
that.
that is not how
Mhm.
that's meant to be used. I'm talking about strategy for change. But if
Yes,
you're in power
mhm,
and somebody comes at you and they're a victim,
absolutely, yeah,
you chose this position of power. So, maybe
yeah,
be a bit understanding about where they were coming
yeah.
from.
Get a clue.
Yeah. Get a clue. Absolutely. Absolutely. Maureen, this, I mean, as always, enlightening. I love talking about these things with you. I just,
Ditto.
yeah, it's, I don't know, such deep conversations. We talk on the phone sometimes,
Mm.
and I'm just like, if other people could listen to these things, like we should just record anytime we talk because I think we just like go to these fascinating issues, I think. And so I'm glad that everybody tuning in got to kind of deep into our conversation. Let us know in the comments what you think. And
Mhm.
I'm just going to go ahead and share a couple things with you all. Of course, we'll share Maureen's social media and ways that you can get in touch with her. She does such amazing work. She's got a website. She works with us at Courage 365. She's our, forget exactly what your title is, but our safety officer, maybe, I think.
Something.
Yes, she's our safety person, and she's created a lot of amazing resources for us. And we're not the only organization she works with. She does so many amazing things, and so we'll link to that. But also, go ahead and follow us on social media. And when you do that, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We stream this live, or we stream this every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. You can catch that or catch the replays at our website, which is courage365.org. Right there, you can see that on the screen. You can also get one of our free ebooks. We have so many different resources. And the one I want to highlight tonight for you is actually we have a text list. This is text messages that we send out every morning, Monday through Friday. They are written by survivors for survivors. They're just empowering text messages. This is not spam. You're not put on a list where you're then messaged by other members on the list. Like, you solely are getting a message from us at Courage 365. And all you have to do to sign up for that, it's free. Just pull your phones out right now. If you've got a phone, just pull it open, flip it to your text portion, create a new message area, and then at the top where you put in a number, I'm going to give you the number, so get ready. All right. Okay, so the number is 917-809-7311. I'll give that to you one more time. That's 917-809-7311. 097311, and then go down to the message field at the bottom there and just type the word courage. Just courage. Just type that in, nothing else. Hit send. You'll automatically be added to our list, and you'll start getting those messages in the morning, again, Monday through Friday. We are so thankful that you all tuned in tonight. If this was helpful to you, if this was enlightening to you, please just go ahead and hit that share button. It really helps us out. It spreads the word and helps us as a society be better at handling situations where people are replatformed after they've done things and harmed people, and it pushes this conversation forward. So please go ahead and hit share for that. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in, and live with courage.